let's get started. Thank you, Shauna, or whoever did that. Doug might have done that. Today, first of all, I mentioned that I passed on some information about some grant activity to Matt, but he already knew about that. So, and I knew he probably would. That's thanks to the Economic Development Board. They passed that information on to me. So I'm going to let Chris go ahead, because this is really exciting, folks. Those of you that don't know this, that the county has kind of, taken a grasp on affordable housing and is going to do some work for us. And Chris is here to talk about that. This is the Deputy County Administrator, Alyssa.
Yes.
Do you have a last name?
Bub. I do have a last name. Yeah, it's Bub. Alyssa Bub.
Alyssa is good. And did you just start this week?
Last week.
Last week? So she is busy getting to know what's going on throughout the county, and she's a welcome addition. Thank you. It's all yours, Chris.
Thank you. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And this kind of started on parallel tracks. For probably 7 years, I've been working on housing issues as a county administrator. I've only been here in Ontario County for 20 months or so now. But literally since I started, that was a discussion that we were having among the leadership team of the county, was the issues of housing across the community. And then it was a weekday morning, I don't remember which day of the week it was, but I got together with Matt and Doug to have coffee, and we were just kind of brainstorming. And I'd mentioned that the county was having discussions at the staff level about housing, and Matt and Doug told me about your group and how the town had been working on this for quite a while. And bumping up into the issue of it being a significant issue for the town, but also for the broader community, and only so much that could be done at the town level to try to address it. And so Matt and Doug kind of asked, well, is this something that the county would be interested in? And I said, yeah, we're definitely interested, and this might be the impetus to kind of get it kicked off. So, kudos to the Board of Supervisors. When I brought the idea up, they were fully supportive. Nobody said, no, we don't want to go down this road, or no, we don't want to spend the money. So we put the RFP out probably a month ago. We've got the responses back. In the process of evaluating and grading them right now, and then the contract will be awarded on August 4th, and we'll be off and running. So we're committed to moving forward. The board has not weighed in. The county's ARPA steering committee has weighed in that the steering committee would like to use ARPA funds to fund it. So that's our plan. And I don't see any resistance from the Board of Supervisors. So at this point, it's kind of full steam ahead. I've talked to Matt and Doug about it, right? And Karen heard my spiel on Tuesday morning. But for those who haven't, I did not call the RFP or the study an affordable housing study, because, to be honest with you, I think it's bigger than that, right? I think it involves senior housing. I think it involves all aspects of housing, including affordable housing. I think that's a really important component, but I think it's a broader discussion. So what we're looking for, we cast a pretty wide net, and we're looking for a really robust inventory of current stock, but then also a really detailed market analysis. And one of the things that I did talk to Matt and Doug about is throughout the process, I'm envisioning that we're going to engage different stakeholders, right? So we've got a whole issue at the county level that's maybe not as germane at the town level of emergency, transitional, and supportive housing for those with substance use and mental health disorders, right? So we've got to work with our partner agencies and our departments that provide those services to figure out what's a housing solution that allows us to provide those services in close proximity to the folks that are dealing with those issues, to help get them stabilized and then on a transition to more permanent housing solutions. But I think your group here at the town of Canandaigua is a critical stakeholder for us to bring to the table from that local community planning perspective, right? And what are the things that the town of Canandaigua has done through your planning efforts, and how does that dovetail with what we're looking at the county level? Because obviously it's a home rule state, and the last thing in the world we want to do is come up with this great shiny plan at the county level and then have the towns and cities say that doesn't work for us, that doesn't fit with our comprehensive plan, that doesn't fit with our zoning scheme, right? So I think it's going to be important to have you folks at the table right from the beginning, so that as we start to look at recommendations and potential solutions, it's in keeping with what the communities want. And then at the end of this, what I want to do is kind of that last stakeholder group that I want to bring to the table is the developers themselves. And I want to really have the conversation with them of, okay, we got the market analysis. These are the needs from the community perspective. From the builder and the developer perspective, what's in the way? What's keeping you from building this type of home or this type of development or senior housing here or wherever it may be? And then try to have a collaborative discussion with the developers about, and again, coming back to you guys, is it zoning? Is it building codes? Or is it infrastructure? Are there places where maybe the local community says they would love to see development, the developers think there's a market opportunity there, but the pipes aren't in the ground? Okay, that's a discussion we can have, right? Can we as the county partner with the town or the city or whomever the infrastructure owner is to figure out a way to get the infrastructure where the community and the developers need it? So I think this is a really exciting first step, but I do just view it as that, a first step, right? And I think there's going to be a whole bunch, I'm kind of using the hub and spokes analogy, right? Where this is going to be kind of the hub of all the data and all the broad collection. And then there's going to be these spokes that come off where we'll be working with you and other towns and cities across the county to say, okay, the plan identified this. How can we make that happen for you? There will be another arm of it that's working with Eileen Tiberio, and how are we going to house, as of yesterday, I think it was 160 people that are homeless. We've got 16 families that make up 44 individuals. In the height of the summer for us, that's incredibly hard to house those folks. You rely on hotels and motels. Not a ton of available occupancy right now. So we've got a homeless issue. We've got to deal with that. And then we've got the mental health, substance use issues that sometimes are homeless, sometimes not, but definitely lead to housing insecurity, and how are we going to provide services to those folks as we move forward? So,
Are addressing that issue, you would be working with organizations like FLACRA?
yes, absolutely.
And all the, okay.
Yeah, FLACRA, Substance and Alcoholism and Substance Abuse, or the council. The Partnership for Ontario County, some of those groups would be part of that stakeholder group that really looks at the substance use. And then what we found through a couple different avenues, we've been having discussions around this whole substance use or substance abuse disorder and homelessness, economic instability. Mental health almost always comes to the table in those discussions. You know, it's very rare that you've got somebody who is got a significant substance use disorder that doesn't have some co-diagnosis of mental health. So talking a lot between our mental health department and FLACRA about how do we coordinate those services? How do we make sure that people are getting the substance use treatment they need, but then also the mental health support and counseling that they need as well. And then another component that kind of comes into this is the education component from FLCC, right? Of how Dr. Nye, give him lots of credit. I meet with him every month and he beats on me every time we meet about, he uses the example of we have to use Campus Gate to house some of our homeless people, right?
Wow.
And Rob always says, they're 200 yards off our campus. How do you let me help those people? Let's get them in a program. Let's get them a certificate. Let's build some skills for them so that once they can get their feet under them, they've got somewhere to go, right? So that's something that we want to work on as part of this too, as part of that transitional housing model of get them stabilized and then start bringing supports and services to them so that their long-term outcome can be way better than our current model.
So just so you know, some of the people who are affiliated with us, in addition to Habitat, is Pathstone, several different areas of Pathstone, which is covers a wide area, much larger than Ontario County. Family Promise,
Yep.
Happiness House, who also has affordable housing units. Doug has been in contact with senior facilities who also look for affordable housing. Eileen Tiberio has been, I've had conversations with her, as well as
Jackie joined us.
the
too,
guy
by the way.
in, well, she's with Happiness House, Jack. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Jackie.
I'm mentioning your name. Section 8 guy.
Andy Ty.
Andy. So I'm happy to share this list with you, because there are people here who can really help. They fit in some of the categories you talked about. And we also have met with developers. We've met with DeMarco. Ryan Wallace is a great
Right.
advocate, a wonderful advocate for our efforts. And are you aware of him in Geneva?
I've heard the,
He owns Solar
actually.
Factory. He owns a solar factory.
I met him at an event
And
a while ago.
we've met with a couple of other developers. Anyway,
Well,
so we initially covered this type of ground just to get our feet on the ground. But the other element that hesitate to mention, but we really needs to be considered, are mobile homes. And so
In what context?
they need to be part of the, well, first of all, they will be a part of your housing inventory.
Absolutely.
But they also need to be considered as a solution, because
As
they
part
are
of the solution.
And so Cook Properties, of course, will, I think, do they own all of the mobile home parks in Ontario County? Pretty much 90% of them.
Actually, with the most recent acquisitions, I think they own almost all of them.
Yeah,
I believe they now control all but one in the town of Canada.
yeah, and I would believe that too.
Okay.
So, they're,
But they've
some of
been
that
a
groundwork.
great partner, and they
Yes.
do a number of things, like, so for instance, in Uptown Landing, they're doing ground set manufactured homes. So they'll actually be single family homes, because they're the way they're gonna be constructed on the property.
Okay.
But they're manufactured off-site and then brought to the site. So
Yep.
they do a variety of.
But,
different
and
things.
in many cases, they manage their properties, which
Yes.
is really important
Yes.
when you're talking affordable housing and homelessness. But I just want to let you know that, we have names to draw on, and Nash here has been heavily involved, and so has the housing people with Pathstone have been very heavily involved. And Sarah couldn't be here today, and neither could Brenda Spratt from Family Promise there. So there's key individuals throughout the county who are knowledgeable about their particular segment.
Absolutely.
And
that-
all the VA hospital
Yep,
also
and then
is
that's the
part of
hope
this.
of kind of going with the stakeholder model, right? Is there's no need for us to reinvent the wheel of everything you guys have done already. And I grew up around here, but I've only been back for not even 2 years. I'm not going to claim to know anywhere near as much as you guys do, who have been doing this for years. So I think Alyssa and I are hopeful that we're going to be able to engage you and other groups across the county and build on what you've done, and take those lists and make some phone calls and have some meetings and bring people together.
And as part of Ontario County Economic Development, of which I've been a part for 12 years now, I can tell you there are businesses who not just advocate for it, insist on having affordable housing for their workforce, because it's so important when they move into our county to be able to attract workers and be able to provide them with livable
Yes.
homes and residences. And one thing that is becoming really readily apparent to me right now is that this is just not home ownership. It as this pandemic happened, we have more and more people who are fancy free, for lack of a better word, but they're apartment dwellers, and they're moving from job to job to see what it is they like, and they want affordable apartments. And I know the town of Canandaigua is looking for owner-owned properties that are affordable, but it's not going to work without both ends.
No, I think you're right. I think that rental units have to be a part of the equation.
They absolutely do.
And you hit on something, at least a little bit tangentially, that I don't really know, and I don't know if there's a data set that helps speak to this, but I have just a gut feeling, right? That after the forced experiment in remote work that we all had through COVID, we've seen it play out nationally and regionally, where employers have had trouble when they tried to mandate that everybody come back to the office 100% in person, right? So I think to a certain extent, in most industries where it's possible, some kind of hybrid work is here to stay.
Yes.
And what I wonder about is, what does that do to Manchester and Phelps?
Yes.
With the exits on the thruway, largely undeveloped, but all of a sudden, does that become now you can live in Phelps or Clifton Springs, and it's not unreasonable to work in Liverpool or Syracuse. You've only got to go a couple days a month. That's not a bad drive. Right, so are we going to start to see an increased demand for people who might be in Brighton or Mattydale or Solvay saying, you know what, I kind of want to get out, a little more elbow room. Boy, if you have Phelps and Manchester aren't bad. Is that what the communities want? What do we need to do from an infrastructure planning perspective to make that happen? And then coming down again to the local level of what are the land use plans that are in place? What are the zoning and regulations? And to your point is, maybe if the town of Canandaigua has decided they want owner occupied,
Yeah.
does Manchester or Shortsville or Phelps or Clifton Springs, maybe they want a big rental
And
development, you know, and so again, try to
Right.
match it with what the
Right.
community wants, but figure out from a broader perspective, you know, we might have a need here, we might have a need here, and I don't think there's any one solution that's gonna fix the problem. And I don't think there's any one solution that fits in every location. So it's trying to make those connections and find what might be appropriate.
And that's the beauty of what you're doing, because you're bringing information to the table, and based on that information, we can go with I hope the easiest road first, and then branch out into the other areas. But at least it would move us forward.
Well, I'm all about
That's-
going after low hanging fruit.
that's,
Yeah, no problem there at all.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, the beauty of the county approach too was what you just described. The individual municipalities going at it on their own are going to miss big segments of the market. First of all, the market's tough to pay attention to,
Yeah.
one individual municipality. But if at the county level we're saying we're looking for this portfolio or
Yeah.
this spectrum
Yeah.
of housing, and we already know the Economic Development Office is able to, or Tom Harvey or anybody's able to speak to a developer and say, we already know. It's Phelps, Clifton Springs, it's Manchester, that's where the apartments want to be, and you won't have any problem with the folks over there.
Community wants you, we want you.
You got it.
What can we do to
That's
make it
Exactly.
happen, right? You
Right.
know,
And
that's a very different discussion with the developer than them coming and saying, we
Absolutely,
think this is
right.
good for you, and
Yeah.
having to convince the community to do
Right.
that.
and throwing
Absolutely.
darts. I mean, that the developer's
That's
really
right.
throwing darts at that point because he's getting market data or she's getting market data on an aggregate level for
Yep.
the county, right?
There's
So,
another piece of this that the county can be hugely helpful. These are our top 5 strategic goals for this year. And this is the one that we're working on here, affordable housing options. But the second part of that is affordable transportation. And that's where the county can be extremely helpful with RTS as we talk about that and everything. I mean, we hear that from businesses in the town of Canandaigua. I'll give you an example. Yesterday morning, I got here to the office and there was a young man sleeping on the picnic table behind the building. And I woke him up and I said, what are you doing? He could only get a ride here from somebody he knew at 5:15. He was coming here for court at 6 p.m. And he was a very nice young man. And I was sitting there and I talked to him for a little bit. He had just gotten a new job, but he had to get a job where he could walk because he doesn't have transportation.
Yep.
That's a huge piece of this also.
Yeah,
I think pretty much everyone at this table can tell you a story like that.
absolutely.
That they know of people I know of people who work at Pactiv who advertise on Facebook. I need
Yep.
a regular
Yep.
ride back and forth from such and such a place to Pactiv. It's, and so I'll tell you my vision. I don't think small, and Ontario County is small. I think in terms of a 5-county unit
Mhm.
working at this, because I think it gives you more leverage on the state level. And I believe you would have more leverage in the tax credit area, but in the
Yeah,
competitiveness.
we're not beating each other up. We've got this unified strategy.
So I do know that Wayne County is interested.
Yep.
And, well, you must know whatever his name, Tom Lyon.
Thomas Lyon, yeah.
Yeah, Tom Lyons
Yeah,
up there, yeah, and I work with
because-
Rick House on a lot of stuff.
Okay, because I've been to one of their panel discussions, and they have some really good ideas. I've also heard that Seneca County is interested.
Okay.
And so My recommendation is go to it, Chris.
Yeah, no, so I'm meeting with Wayne County, Seneca County, Yates County, Schuyler, Livingston, Steuben, and Genesee next Friday.
No,
And
that's-
this will be one of our points of discussion. And we get together every 3 months, all of us administrators, and just talk about issues like this. Doug, a couple points on what you said. The transportation thing, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's really, really, really hard for us to even solve on the county level. That's actually one of those where we're better off in a regional perspective.
Mhm.
And at least to the best of my knowledge, nobody has cracked the rural transportation
No, I know
issue.
they haven't.
And I just had a conversation with RTS the other day. They can't find drivers for their existing routes. So when we talk about trying to expand or doing more on-demand services to really serve the people like you're talking about, they don't have the people to fill those roles. But also, Doug, I'm looking at your 5 strategic goals. I think there's an argument that what we're talking about here today can help with every single one of those. And that first one, we didn't talk about it before, but Alyssa and I were in a meeting with Cornell Cooperative Extension yesterday. And we're partnering with Cornell Cooperative Extension and 3 towns, I think it ended up being, to put in for a farm worker housing grant, right? So to continue to keep our remaining farms viable, farm worker housing is an important discussion to have. I've already
Absolutely.
had that discussion
Absolutely.
with CCE about making sure that they're a component of that stakeholder discussion, because they've got the relationships with the farmers, right? They know what those needs are. And that gets into mobile homes, that gets into what the local zoning is.
Yeah.
A lot of municipalities, I don't know specifically town of Canandaigua, apartment structures for farm worker housing or a zoning trip on, right? So how do we work and make sure that that
Yeah.
works?
Some years ago, real quick, I owned in a partnership muck land out in Potter.
Okay.
There was a big issue. You just hit it right on the head. But it's housing, with these guys. I mean, they're out there working in muck, come home, and who knows what happens after that. It's, yeah.
But then if we do correctly planned development, that can help with your second bullet as well, right? That's how we establish the funds and the parameters to then preserve those lands that your community's identified. Obviously, bullet 3, that's kind of right where we are. That's what we're doing. Bullet 4 too, and then again, that last one, construction of road, sidewalks, and bike lanes, that's where we leverage the development input. And we work with those developers and say, okay, we're gonna help expand the infrastructure. You gotta help us with the bike lanes. You gotta help us with the connection to this trail system. This is what we wanna do. And those are
Well,
plans.
when you talk about the rural transportation issues, honestly, even things like shared bikes and stuff become part of that. If somebody can ride their bike to work, where they
That's
can
right.
do that's an option.
Absolutely, but we've gotta have the infrastructure that they can get
Yes.
safely.
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
But I
Right.
think developers are hearing more and more that when they're in their initial discussions, and I think the more that municipalities discuss it, bring it up initially, the more likely we are they're able to come to the table already prepared with that type of.
Yeah, and I think this goes to what Matt was saying a little bit earlier, right? As long as if we can do our best to figure out what we collectively as the county and all of you as municipalities want and set those expectations up front, developers can deal with that.
Mhm.
Right? What they can't deal with is the moving target, right? If they know what where the bar is set and they can do the cost benefit and say, yeah, we can do that, that's feasible, they're okay. It's when you keep moving the goalpost on them. You say, wow, what about this? Or we thought about this, or we
Yeah.
just had a discussion and this would be nice. That's what kills deals, right? So as much as we can do up front to say, these are our priorities, this is what it's gotta be, so that when we come to the table the first time, we can lay out, this is what the municipality needs. Can you make it work or not?
It would, in my vision, and Nash knows this, I envision a model community to show off to the rest of the world, that this is how you do it. This is how you cover the issue. You have, Habitat has been a leader in several areas in doing something like this. And in California, they had a community, what did I say, 17 homes, something like that, where they actually had a community of X number of homes, and it was managed by Habitat, and it was affordable. And it provided the resources that we're talking about here. I don't mean it has to be exactly that, but you see where I'm going
I
with
do, and
this.
I-
It'd be great to have Ontario County be that showcase for solving a problem like this.
I agree with you, but I think the only differentiation I would make is that our likely solution is, our likely successful solution is more often than not going to be a whole bunch of different little solutions.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, so it might be a 17-unit habitat development somewhere. It might be a phase 3 or 4 of Solar Village in Geneva, and it might be a large Section 8 development somewhere as well. And it could be a huge residential apartment building in Manchester and a beautiful new subdivision in East Bloomfield or something like that, right? But it's gonna be a lot of different approaches because the issue that we're talking about is so broad.
It is broad and covers different types of population, as
Absolutely.
you brought up initially with, with Black the VA and things like that. It's, I agree. You should go visit, Ryan Wallace is building a solar affordable apartment complex in Geneva.
Yes.
Have you been there?
I have not, it's on my list of tours
It's
to take.
really interesting, and it'd be well worth the visit and talk to him because he is a wealth of information.
Yeah.
Chris, one of the things that we're fortunate, we've spent years now in the planning stages.
Yeah.
The maps, so this is our working room, right? So every sewer line in the town of Canandaigua is mapped up there on the wall behind you. We know the size of the sewer lines, where the sewer lines are. We know the areas where it's not even possible to run sewer because of the topography, where sewer is envisioned or not envisioned. Every water line is mapped. We have all of our ecological communities mapped behind Yvonne, our steep slopes, our scenic view shed, our forest protection area, our lands of conservation value, and behind Matt, that's our agriculture enhanced, our strategic farmland protection area. And so when we start to really put all those things together and overlay them, it leaves the area really predominantly for us that is north of the city of Canandaigua being uptown that can really accommodate the development based on the water, the sewer, the zoning, the not having the natural resources to be negatively impacted, that sort of stuff. That's not to say there can't be other development, but truthfully, I don't know how many communities in Ontario County have thought about this. And I think that's another step that's got to be at least factored in, honestly, as
I
you kind
agree.
of go through.
Where do you want it and what's possible?
Right.
Yeah, and I think going back to Karen's point, right? I agree with you guys wholeheartedly that I think Canandaigua has done amazing work on the planning side of things. And so I think that becomes the model, right, that we show the other communities. Of when we finish the study and we're able to have those discussions, then Canandaigua is going to kind of be the low-hanging fruit. These guys are ready to go. They've got things in place. This is what we can make happen. And I think that'll get the attention of maybe an East Bloomfield or another community that may have not really thought that it was something that was viable for them. And they said, wow, it worked really well in Canandaigua. I like what they've got going on. Okay, maybe we need to start having those discussions.
I'm working on Victor and Farmington.
Farmington's got a lot going on.
Yeah, Farmington doesn't think there's a problem.
What do you mean by that?
Pete Inglesby, we don't have a problem. We got all sorts of houses.
I think Pete agrees that there is an issue countywide, but I agree with you
Yes,
that he
yes,
thinks
yeah, I
Farmington doesn't have an
Right,
issue
that's kind
because
of do it in
there's so much
Canandaigua.
going on in
Yeah, I
Farmington.
agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have the other issue when you talk about affordability, right? You just look at the numbers. So there's 4,999 parcels in the town of Canandaigua.
We
The
can
average-
round up, can't we?
We need one more parcel. We need somebody
Somebody's
to
gonna
subdivide
subdivide.
something to get to that 5,000 number, right? But actually, I just was looking at the final tax roll yesterday. It's 4,999. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh,
come on.
Right. So, but so the average home is $300,000 in the town of Canandaigua. That is it. That's not affordable for a lot of folks, right? The lowest assessed home in the town of Canandaigua was 14,000. The highest assessed home in the town of Canandaigua was 4.8 million. We have a huge range.
Right.
I don't know that you would see that in other places, but it's a
So
huge
just
range.
curiously, have you, and you probably haven't had time because I know the rules just got finalized, right? But I would love to kind of geek out on an actual statistical analysis of that. What's the distribution look like? Is it a huge sweeping bell curve? Is it binomial? I have a sense that it's kind of binomial, that you've got a group that's maybe in the 150 to 200,000, and then a group where the median's in the 600 to 700,000.
Yeah,
Right?
so there's actually, I've been looking at it by water districts because I'm in budget mode. So,
Okay, sure.
So by water districts, right, there's a lot of water districts where the average is 200, 250,000, actually. They tend to be the rural areas.
Okay, all right.
Right? And then you've got some housing developments that are part of certain water districts that the average is 500,000, right? So they are split up a little bit, but most of them are in that 250, 300,000 ballpark range.
Interesting.
I tripped over a data point a couple weeks ago. We were working on an affordable housing solution for someone, and we made the mistake of saying, we run these standard calculations, and it's like 30% of gross income. The average gross income in Canandaigua is X, 30% of that is Y. The average home in Canandaigua is assessed at Z, and Y and Z are roughly equivalent. Canandaigua doesn't have an affordable housing, but like you can trip yourself on that data.
Yeah,
That's where some
sure.
people say, "Oh, we
Absolutely.
don't have an affordable." Esri is a data set that we use a lot, and Esri has this indexing tool that uses that number, and they say, compared to every community in the country, you're 200% more affordable than anyone else. But what they don't do is parse the way you just did. Like, how do we parse that out to say, where are the clumps? And in all honesty, there's a big chunk of the reason Canandaigua's housing appears to be affordable is because all of the people working in Canandaigua are living somewhere else, right? So when they're reporting from their census, they're reporting that they're living in Geneva or they're living in the city of Canandaigua. And so their average income doesn't show up in that average income calculation. So
The
it's
other thing,
really tough.
when I've looked at some national and regional, broader than the state statistics on housing, I think something that's somewhat unique to New York and other counties in the Northeast or states in the Northeast corridor that we have to take into account is that analysis you just talked about, Matt, but making sure that we add property tax into that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole thing.
Right, because you'll read these studies about affordable housing, and they'll say the 30% of gross income and all those other things, and you start thinking about it, and you're like, but a person in New York can't afford a $2,000 a month mortgage payment on that income, because then they've got a $15,000 property tax bill on it.
Right.
When you amortize that or escrow into that mortgage, that $2,000 mortgage payment becomes $3,500 a month. That's no longer affordable, right? So the whole cost of ownership needs to be discussed. And normally we don't do that. We look at the cost of the house.
Total cost. That's
In
right.
New York, that includes the rent you pay us as the government to keep your property, right? And I hate thinking of it that way, but that's essentially what it is. It's part of your housing cost that needs to be part of our analysis.
We did
That's
this.
such a great call out, Chris, because that's certainly something that we're seeing right now with Habitat, especially, coming out of the pandemic and all of the, the market for housing that has just really blown up. Appraisal values are going up, which means assessment values are going up, which means that a house, 3 years ago that might have been affordable for somebody now isn't, because the taxes have gone up on that property, right? So that is a great thing, that we need to keep all of those things in balance, because it can really affect how much, especially if we're talking about affordable housing, up, we're talking about subsidy, how much subsidy is needed just from a tax perspective alone.
And that's why, I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, but that's why a place like the town of Canandaigua or the town of Farmington, that's an advantage that they have, right? Because their base is so huge
Yes.
that the actual rate stays real small. And so if you can keep the assessed value of an affordable unit modest, then
Right.
you can tame that. Try to do affordable housing in the cities, particularly in Geneva. I mean, Geneva is like $18 $1,000, right? So you just go to $100,000 home, which is tough to get to anyway, and then $100,000 home. By the time you throw all in with the tax, with the school tax and everything, it's $50 $1,000.
Yeah, and I think the component when we look at the property tax makeup for municipalities in New York, development is only really advantageous for a town from a revenue perspective, or any municipality, right? when it has some commercial and industrial component, right? Like the rule of thumb that you used to learn when you were taking planning classes was a residential development generates $1.61 in demand for services and $1 in tax revenue, right? And so you may have all these beautiful homes in Farmington. If there's no commercial or industrial to offset that, the school taxes are still going to kill people. Your assessed value is going to go through the roof, but that school rate is going to stay the same because they've got more kids, they got more services, they got to do it, right? Same thing with the town. You need commercial and industrial because they don't use the same services that residential does. So without that mix, right, that's what really crushes bedroom communities a lot of times, is that, you know, the Niskayunas of the world and Colony and stuff like that, they've got huge residential developments, but they don't have the commercial and industrial to offset it. So that's a part of that balance of trying to do the development with how we raise taxes in New York, which is not, it is not an equitable formula. It's not the best way to do it, but it's what we got. So we just need to keep it in mind as we try to talk these issues through.
And Vic, I mean, 96 at 490 really saves the day in Victor,
Absolutely.
because I didn't grow up here, but my relatives did, and they talk about the progression of Victor, right, and how it developed out. And without that Eastview corridor,
Right.
and Farmington is really faced with that, right? I
Well,
mean, Farmington doesn't.
Farmington's a little different because Farmington has 4 school districts,
Yeah.
2 of which are relatively low-income districts.
Yes.
Red
Red
Jacket and
Palmac. Yeah.
And of course, Victor is a much higher one. Canandaigua is kind of in the middle. So they reap the benefit of that, and I can understand when Pete talks about we don't have a problem. They typically, depending on where you live in Farmington and what school district you're in, you have the benefit of different tax rates for.
But if you grew out of a farm, right? You grew out of a
Yep.
farm community, like
Yeah.
both Victor and Farmington did.
Yep.
You start out real conservative, right? You say, all right, we're going to allow some housing development. We're not going to get in the services business. You know, we're not going to have a parks department, blah, blah,
Yep.
blah, blah. But the more of those rooftops you add, the more that 61 cents starts to creep right up.
Absolutely.
People really want, if you live in a subdivision or if you live in a town, you want parks, you
Yep.
want programs, you
Exactly.
want garbage service, you want all that stuff.
Absolutely.
That's
It
right.
comes eventually.
Funny thing, isn't
Mhm.
it? So have you heard of Alice?
Asset limited, income constrained,
Yes.
and employed.
Have you seen this?
Yeah, I think that's
You
a
got that.
hugely beneficial lens to look at things. through.
Sarah had to have a big smile on her face when Chris recited that. Impressive.
No, I think that's an incredibly important lens. I've got Alyssa taking the Bridges Out of Poverty training here shortly. It's a training I've been through twice. I'm also working with Eileen to figure out how to do it. I've been through what we call poverty simulations, which is like a spin-off of Bridges Out of Poverty.
I actually lived it at one point in my
Yep.
life. So,
But very eye-opening, and I think it's really important for policymakers to understand where
Yes.
our constituents that we're trying to serve are coming from. Trying to understand that for lack of a better word, right, like some of the tropes that we throw around about or are thrown around about these folks are just not true. These people aren't lazy. They're making rational economic decisions, right? So how do we as policymakers try to affect those decisions? And you can't do that unless you can, I don't think you can really ever truly understand, but you need to try to put yourself in their shoes, try to empathize with where they're coming from and understand that they're making rational decisions, right? We just need to try to change the formula a little bit so that they can have better outcomes from those decisions.
well, they don't have the power to create the change that really needs to be affected in their lives.
Correct.
It's up to the people at the head of the table to recognize, number one, that they're there, and number two, that you have the power to create change or to at least encourage change.
Yeah, one of the things, I give this board of supervisors credit, my previous employers didn't feel this way. I feel very confident making this statement. This board of supervisors feels very, very strongly that these are our constituents. These are our community members. They don't view them as the others, right? They're members of our community that we need to try to help bring along. And I think that's kind of the perspective that we're coming to this entire thing through, is that these aren't somebody else's problem. These aren't members of our community that are undesirable. These are important members and residents, and we got to figure out how to try to come up with better outcomes for them. So it's a refreshing approach to things for me. And one of the reasons that this board didn't bat an eye when I said, I want to spend a bunch of money to do a study. They said, yeah, I think that's important.
Getting back to people having to make a living. My former life, I was a bid director for downtown Canandaigua.
Oh, okay.
And what I would see in the morning during the week are cars dropping off their kids. We have a little pocket park downtown, drop them off there, and downtown would turn into a babysitter. And asking parents, what's going on? We gotta work.
Yeah.
The kid couldn't afford, the daycare or anything.
That's right.
Yeah, it just.
Really important discussion. I give the governor credit
Oh.
in starting to bring some attention to that. She's made a couple of releases lately about the term childcare desert, and she put some funding behind it, right? So I've been on the fence about this, and I don't want to make this thing so big that it implodes on itself. So I don't want to approach it in the housing study, I don't think. But, one of the things we started talking to through economic development, also raised it with our leadership at the county level yesterday, is employer-sponsored childcare. Right, we just don't have enough childcare slots for the number of kids in the community. And the governor, again, to her credit, made a funding pot available last week, I think she announced it, where OCFS registered childcare facilities can use and apply for some of these monies to increase wages, right, for the kids that or the people that we entrust our kids to. If we want to attract good people to do that, spend 8 hours, 10 hours a day with our kids, so pay them a higher rate. Our current model is not sustainable. Kind of as simple as that. I don't know what the solution is, but that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, but
It's
it's,
a little bit more in Ryan's wheelhouse as far as workforce.
Yeah.
And trying to talk about bringing DSS, OCFS to the table, and Workforce Investment Board, and what are some out of the box solutions for this?
well, I know the Workforce Investment Board would be interested in.
And they are, and they're doing some work on it. It's a
And same way with DSS. I mean, when he told me what the backlog was, I was astonished. I was astonished. And I'm astonished at the waiting lists on all of the current affordable housing.
Yeah.
Either subsidized or just affordable.
Yes.
It just is mind-boggling, because here we are in a desirable area, and Creekview has 57 people on their waiting list now? And it takes up to 2 years to get a place.
But even the non-subsidized are coming.
Even the yeah,
Saratoga
absolutely.
Crossing, I think, has a 9 or 12 month waiting
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
So again, it's across the board.
It's across the board, exactly, but it affects the subsidized population more, because they are limited in what they can look at.
New York Times had a great
I
article.
agree with that, but I think it's equally important for us to look at all
Oh, I do
aspects.
too.
of it.
Oh, I
But yes,
I
I think you're
absolutely agree with you.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, the New York Times had a great article this week about, they used to call it the affordable housing issue coming inland. They were talking about how it used to be a bi-coastal issue.
Yeah, sure.
It was New York City,
San Francisco, yeah.
LA. They called it a blue state issue, and I think even internal to New York, probably called a blue county issue,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's a New York City problem that's not an upstate New York problem. And they said they showed they had a great map, like a heat map of affordability across the country, and what's changed, the metros that have changed, that went from not just affordable units, but surplus housing units, like some small places like Yuba City, California, had a 12% housing surplus in 2010 and have a 5% housing deficit in 2022. So almost a 20-point swing in 10 years. And they cited, I mean, they laid some of the blame at local government to say your regulations aren't up to speed.
Yeah.
Developers want to go where it's easy to develop. And then, of course, now the latest piece is it's very difficult to build something for less than $100 a square foot.
Yeah.
Anything
Yeah.
for
Yes,
less than
right,
$100 a
absolutely.
square foot.
Yeah.
And so at 1,000 square feet, we're talking about $100,000 home.
Yeah.
Then you got to own it, right? And so,
That's absolutely right.
and so
Well, you have to put it somewhere
it's-
too.
Yeah, you have to put it on land, right?
Yeah.
And so it's an incredibly complex issue, but I'm excited. The federal government now starting to take a look, right? All right, this isn't just a big city issue anymore. This is a rural issue as well, and I don't know that it'll go anywhere, but there's aggressive legislation at the federal level to put some dollars behind it. There's also aggressive legislation to have the federal government take over zoning, so we have to talk about that.
A big part of that problem, that we're seeing those swings from areas that maybe had a surplus now having a deficit is housing that once was affordable, moving out of that
Yeah,
space.
exactly.
That's
Right.
That's a great point.
And so, whatever strategies we're looking at to try to incentivize, developers to build, I think we also need to be looking at strategies for the long term of, okay, so we build 20 units of affordable housing next year. What does that look like 10 years from now? How do we make sure that those units stay affordable, especially in the ownership space? That's really hard to kind of look at and structure. Rentals a little bit more,
Yes.
flexible in that sense, but
You shared a really cool model a while back about the shared equity.
Yeah.
Housing project.
yeah, so looking at shared equity, looking at community land trust models for housing where, the resale values of the homes are restricted in terms of, the incomes that those can serve. I think those are strategies that, again, used to just be major metro areas that were, employing these, even 8 years ago when I first got involved as director for Habitat, we were having conversations at the state level, and I'd hear from colleagues from New York City, and they'd be talking about shared equity housing. All of a sudden, we're like, yeah, okay, well, we're not in New York City, we're Ontario County. Now it's like, okay, tell me what you know. I think these are strategies that we really need to make sure are we're up on and are being incorporated into future development.
And one of those that we've talked about, again, tended to be an urban county phenomenon, now becoming a little bit more rural, is the land trust or the land bank model, right? The issue is, and it's good and bad. Good in that I'm amazed at how few parcels we put through the tax foreclosure process every year. For the number of parcels that we're responsible for enforcement for, I think the county put through 12 this year.
Wow.
Right, so in Washington County, where I'm coming from, we would put through 150 to 200 a year. We'd probably about a third of the number of parcels as Ontario County. When you had that kind of volume, you can do something meaningful with a land bank type model, right? Where we go through, we pick the ones that make sense, we try to rehab them, we can set up some kind of an affordable housing model. We just don't. We don't put that many properties through the foreclosure process, so we as a county have 12 parcels a year to look at.
What's the trend on that though? That seems way low.
It's
Yeah,
down,
but
it's been down consistently for the
it's
last 4
always
years,
been.
just
Is
keeps
that
going
right?
down,
Yeah.
for us at least.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, slightly different angle here, but it's related to this. I'm happy to hear that your Dr. Nye is talking about that, because there's a portion of the town of Canandaigua in that area where we have a number of units that have been geared or retro geared towards affordable housing, specifically like DSS placement and those sorts of things. We've got probably, I'm gonna guess, just under 1,000 people living in that area in the town of Canandaigua. Maybe a little bit less than that, but in those type of situation. The other thing that we've seen is a conversion from student housing to year-round housing for these DSS placements in that particular area of the town of Canandaigua. And the other thing that just recently we've started to experience more is DSS placement in units that maybe do not meet code. And I've got a situation here where we're actually taking the owner to court on August the 11th, and it could potentially be the displacement of 40 families. And so maybe as part of your group, and I'm sorry to just spring this on you, but it's topical, maybe there could be some new mechanism where DSS placement is also making sure that there's a code compliance or something.
I talked about this with Eileen probably 3 weeks ago. It was probably at our last cycle of our core leadership group, and she agrees with the severity of the problem and the need to do something. Her concern is, again, I'm going to keep coming back to it, we're short on staff right now across the organization, and she was trying to think through and wrap her head around kind of the administrative side of how do we implement that. So it is something that's on our radar. I didn't know about this particular case because we had one in Bloomfield that spurred that conversation. Something that's on our radar. I know
Even if it's a software or something that we could
we're
flag or
open to
something.
discussions on that because we agree that it's an issue. We just need to be careful about trying not to set up something that we can't implement and follow through on.
Right.
But yeah, I can't even imagine what's gonna happen if we have to displace
Right.
those 40 families.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. I've actually got a meeting with Eileen this afternoon. I'll bring it up.
But it's a real issue, even in the town of Canandaigua.
Sure.
It's,
Yeah.
The other thing that I just kind of brought up to our core team yesterday, it's been kicking around in the back of my mind a little bit, and I just wanted your input, from the town's perspective. I cannot for the life of me remember where I read the article. I think it was Bloomberg, but it was talking about the proliferation of short-term vacation rentals through Airbnb and VRBO, and the impact that's had on the housing market. Where, and the lens they were looking at it through was that there was a large section of the, for lack of a better term, I'll just call it the middle class, right? There was a section of the middle class that second home ownership was not feasible. But now with the Airbnb and VRBO, it is, right? So they couldn't afford the mortgage and the property taxes on a house on Honeoye Lake. I'll just use it as an example. On Honeoye Lake before, but they know now if they rent it out for 6 weeks in the winter and a couple weeks in the shoulder seasons, they can cover their mortgage payment and their taxes. So now they bought that second home on Honeoye Lake. Now again, the lake's maybe not the best example, but we've got Airbnbs all over the place, right? So how much of our housing stock has kind of been impacted by this expansion of the second homeowner class, whatever that is?
I'm glad you brought that up. I can give you some numbers. So
Can
we
you?
have a software system where it automatically goes out and finds in the town of Canandaigua all the short-term rentals, anything that's listed through VRBO, Airbnb, et cetera. Just prior to COVID, we had, give or take, I'm going to say it was 40 to 60 approximately short-term rentals. Since COVID, post-pandemic, we're upwards close to 200. And what we have seen is actually during the pandemic, and we've followed this through, people pulled money out of the stock market, bought these homes, and they're now owned by LLCs. And so then we have to track, okay, who's the owner of the LLC? Who is the entity that we can call at 2 a.m. when there's a complaint?
Yeah.
Not this LLC, right? So there was a huge increase that we've seen through that. So that takes housing out of the single family home, at 200 plus homes now.
Which to Nash's point, pushes somebody
Right,
down.
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
pressure
right,
factor,
absolutely.
right,
Exactly,
yes,
yeah.
right, absolutely. What's the name of that software?
Property Guard is the one that we're using.
Okay, all right, I haven't heard of that one,
Yeah.
so let me.
Then I can also say that as bid director, you get used to who's living where and what's going on, that type of thing. And when I go down to Canandaigua today, it's a different person that's walking the sidewalk with families alone, taking their time to go through the windows, and shop. It's different. I don't know the impact it's had on housing, but they certainly have to stay someplace, so that they're probably Airbnbs.
Yeah.
Well, it has had an impact on housing because the more Airbnbs and VRBOs that we have
Yeah.
invites the more tourists to the area. The more
Absolutely.
tourists you have coming to the area, it's good, they spend their money, but they also require services. And we all know who's in the service industry. How much does the service industry pay? I challenge you
Oh,
Right.
I
to
see.
find someone in the service industry that makes more on a permanent basis, makes more than $15 to $18 an hour. And
If that much.
Right.
I'm
starting-
being generous.
Well, they're starting to now, because of the status of the labor market.
Because there's a shortage.
Correct.
Yes, and
Correct.
that's why I'm saying that. But these are, that is our market. That's what you're looking at, the affordable housing, or the affordable, ours says affordable. Well, actually, he didn't copy that right. For local workforce, for the local workforce.
Yeah.
And so the more we have this, the more we're going to have a need for this job sector that doesn't pay enough for people to afford to live. And you know what? I've lived in a place in the inner city of a large city. We had rats. You know, we dealt with toilets that didn't work. And actually, I've been to third world countries and slept on a board and used latrines and had to walk 150 feet in the backyard to have any water. I mean, I've seen all this stuff. Why would we want in the USA, why would we want to even cater to people like that? We need to help these people, and that's, I mean, I am completely behind you in what you're doing here, and I am so thankful because that was my first goal in this particular team. And it's been, what, a year and about a year and a quarter since we started this. And our first goal was to get out information about it.
Sure.
And here's our email list of people that get this every month. They don't all show up, but they do on occasion. We're getting out information. We finally have enticed the county to
I'm sorry it took me
actually,
so long.
I don't think it took that long at all. I fully expected a 2 to 3 year period. And I feel like I won't even be here when there is actually a model community, because I'm old. All right, so I'll be in one of the Quail Summit or something. But I feel a sense of success that you have taken the ball and are going to do the critical factor, because I can tell you all this stuff, and I have another file that's about that big, full of reading material, and every single thing I have read says you need a housing inventory before you can make any plans.
I think we have, again, I've been working on this for a long time in my career. And I did an affordable housing feasibility study in Washington County that almost cost me my job. It was that unpopular. And I've seen this as a unique opportunity. It's finally come, and I don't mean that in a positive way, but it is come to enough of a crisis that it is finally on everybody's radar. Right? And so I think we have a unique opportunity right now. We've got everybody's attention. Well, let's get them to the table and try to do something meaningful while it's still, until the next emergency comes up, right? Right now, this is front and foremost. Everybody is willing to recognize, even Pete, despite his comments about what might be going on in Farmington, Peter does agree that we have a housing shortage across the county. So, you know, we've kind of gotten over that first initial resistance that I haven't been able to get over in the past. So I'd like to strike while the iron's hot.
Pete actually is a friend.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy. I love working with Pete.
So is Jack. Yeah, but you do need the cooperation of all of the municipalities in the county, and
That's why your approach makes so much sense, because we're not limiting it, we're really
Right.
looking at housing as a total
Right.
picture.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we look at it as a total picture and then be very careful about how any recommendations are made so that it is unbelievably clear. It's up to the local municipality. The county is not going to show up anywhere and say, you shall do this, right? It's, we are here to partner, we're here to facilitate, we're going to try to make things happen for you. But if your community decides you don't want it, okay, that's up to you guys. That's how the system works.
it's not just the community, as we think of the community, houses and people, it's the businesses, the professionals in the community, the industrial complexes in the community. And I can tell you when I was employed, I was a CFO, and I used to recommend to our employees, because we had a relatively low rate position in the company, that they look in Wayne County for housing.
Okay.
It would kill me to do that. I mean,
Sure.
we were originally in Shortsville, and they couldn't afford to live in Shortsville. I'd also suggest that you bring in people from the business community like that.
Oh, absolutely.
To work with you, because,
That's why Ryan's on the steering committee.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so he's going to be our avenue to bring the business, the commercial and the industrial sectors to the table.
And because I know personally, and not just from that board, but also from Rotary and from interacting with other businesses, that the businesses are suffering because they don't have the places to house their people. And you know, that's Ontario County enjoys the reputation of being one of the most stable growth counties
Yes.
in New York State. And I want our county to continue to enjoy that title.
Like one of two, right, Doug?
Yeah.
Saratoga and Ontario.
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
That's the truth.
Right, not Westchester, not,
Nope.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Saratoga and Ontario.
So what do you see us doing, contributing? I mean, do we meet once a month, a couple months? I don't know.
Yep.
What's the,
So it's still a little up in the air, so I can't answer that question in detail yet,
Sure.
as far as meeting frequency or anything, but as I mentioned earlier, I view you all as a really important partner in this effort, right? And I do think probably more than any other community in the county, the town of Canandaigua has moved this ball forward already. So I view you as kind of the first and foremost stakeholder at the table to tell us what you've done. Again, Karen, going back to your list, right? What have you guys done? Who have you guys talked to? What are the conversations you've had? And then I'll be looking for, if you're willing to share it with us, for input from you guys. What are things you found? What are the discussions you've had? Where should we look? We talked about a lot of that today, but it'll be more formalized, right? And then as the project goes on, there will be different groups of stakeholders who are kind of brought in for topic discussions. And then I see probably a draft plan coming to you guys once we get that point for your feedback and everything else before it becomes finalized.
Well, one of the things that we have talked about moving to is having a meet and greet with local developers, right, Doug? And I see no reason why we couldn't go ahead and do that.
No,
And
by all means.
and just kind of pave the way.
Yeah.
And
I think letting them know that the town of Canandaigua is interested in partnering with them does absolutely no harm.
and can we let them know that the county is working on the issue
Of
also?
course, yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, because I really think that probably should be our next step. And
and also, Doug had mentioned that, I mean, they probably have a lot of information here. And what came across my mind is trying not to duplicate effort.
Yes, agreed wholeheartedly.
Okay, I
Yes.
just wanted to.
Completely agree with that.
yeah,
And that's why I was indicating I wanted you guys at the table kind of first, right? Because you've done a lot.
Yeah.
And there's no sense in us redoing. If you've moved the needle this far, then let's start where you left off so we can just move it that much further, right? Now I see no reason to redo.
I think some stakeholders that we're leaving out are the town residents of Canandaigua. I'm not sure a lot of people are aware of what affordable housing is, the ramifications of it, and just the discussions that we're having today. Have we thought about having an open forum, like an open town hall type meeting to introduce these ideas to the residents of the town of Canandaigua?
I'll look to Doug for that answer.
Well, I mean, we certainly can have meetings. We certainly have had meetings relative to the comprehensive plan, relative to the goals, the public hearing, even the goals that were adopted by the town board, these top 5. We can certainly hold public information meetings. That's not a problem at all. But the initiative that the county's doing, they'll be doing their own public engagement sessions, so to speak. And
Yeah,
certainly
there's a pretty
that's-
robust.
No, I understand that, but if that public meeting and the county is going to use Canandaigua as the poster child, I think it's only fair that the residents know what's going on. I mean, it seems like a lot of people that I've talked to have very different emotions about affordable housing. Not against it, but want more information about it.
Well, we can certainly have, it's certainly, I mean, this team can have a public informational session. We could certainly do that, or the town board could schedule something, whichever. That's not a problem. I think one of the things that, Dave, probably people don't realize is like what I was saying, that the issue that already exists in the town of Canandaigua. I don't think a lot of people realize that it's already here.
I'm not arguing one side or the other. What I'm saying is that at some point in time, the town residents need to be aware of affordable housing, what it is, what it isn't. And I from the conversations I've had with people, they have no idea.
Yeah, I've had the same,
Frankly-
nobody knows what it means.
All right, well, and I think it, go ahead.
Everyone I've talked to says we have enough affordable housing. Because when we look at it globally, the town and city of Canandaigua, there seems to be an abundance of it. That's why I think this inventory is very important. And certainly when that gets done, we certainly want to roll that out in a public forum.
Yeah, there's lots of definitions at stake, right? You know, that would drive the discussion, the definition of affordable, what that really means and what it looks like, the definition of enough, right?
I mean, my daughter's a school teacher. Two school teachers on an income can't really afford a house in Canandaigua right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And if two school teachers on their combined income cannot afford a house in Canandaigua, think of two waitresses or a waiter and a waitress from the town of Canandaigua. What can they afford? And so I agree with you, Dave, that it'd be good to have community input. But
I think it's
you and I
imperative.
have both been at community meetings that you and I have been to, and Tom has been to, and Yvonne has been to, and Sal has been to, and that's pretty much it.
Right, but I think, I mean, I know there's a town board meeting coming up that people will probably pack it in. I think affordable housing is an issue that people, either they want more knowledge on, or they have an opinion on, or they have an opinion on based on incorrect data.
Well, to that point though, Dave, I wonder if we should wait until the county has the information and then have a public information based on the facts.
I totally agree with that, but I think we need to put that on the calendar. When that inventory is done, that's the prime time to roll out an informational meeting for the town of Canandaigua on affordable housing, because then we have the facts.
Yes,
That's great.
and I would agree.
Do you envision the report back based on town? Like, would you be able to share with us
Yeah.
the data specifically for the town of Canandaigua that we could then have a meeting on?
I don't know that 100%, but I think so. So
Okay.
yes. And David, I think your point is very well taken. I would absolutely leave it to you all to decide what's best in terms of outreach to the residents of the town of Canandaigua. I would just like to clarify the point. I've been very careful in how I have discussed this with the board, how I have crafted the RFP, and how I intend to communicate it moving forward. This is not an affordable housing study. This is a housing assessment. Okay, the issue at hand and what we are discussing is much bigger than affordable housing. And I think by addressing it as a holistic examination of housing, we can get people to come to the table without their guard up quite so much. Then we can have those really meaningful discussions about what is affordable. What does it look like? It's not all Section 8. That's not what we're talking about anymore, right? That was 50 years ago. We've moved on. And I think I've been very careful to craft it that way because the public outreach and the public engagement is critical to this. Right? If we do this in a vacuum and this just comes out and hits the street, it's going to blow up. The community, as many people as we can get to participate, which is usually not many, but as many as we can, we have to have them at the table, and we have to have those discussions about affordable housing is a component of what our needs are. We also have significant needs for senior housing. We also have a need for starter homes, whatever that looks like, right? All those things, and I think we can get there with people, but it's really, really important how we frame the discussion to get people to come to the table with an open mind.
Well, from the very start with this committee, I believe, I've tried to make it perfectly clear, we are not here to solve the homelessness problem, because
No, that's our
homelessness,
problem, unfortunately.
homelessness has a different element to it. And it's we're here to solve affordable workforce housing. And in my mind, it is two entirely different things.
I'd like to push back on that a little bit.
Really?
I'd like to say that they're different ends of the same spectrum.
And I would agree with that.
Somebody may present as homeless, but gosh darn it, our goal should be to get them stabilized,
Right.
some skills, and fully employed in housing.
But it's a different, you have to approach it differently than what we're going to be approaching.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
disagree
yeah.
with that. Yeah.
So I'll be happy if we could just approach what we're approaching right now,
Mhm.
workforce housing, And I know your inventory will cover both ends of the
Yes,
spectrum.
absolutely. Yep.
So, but, you know, I'm not afraid of resistance from town residents. But I really would like to be, you know, I am an advocate of getting the biggest bang for your buck.
Mhm.
And that is working on workforce housing.
It's also a question of exporting your problem, right? So
Exactly.
if you, and not, it is a problem, but so a fun data set is lay out the wage, you know, lay out the wage spectrum in Canandaigua and the concentration around wages in Canandaigua. Here's people who work in Canandaigua, and here's the housing values in Canandaigua across the bottom. And this whole group is expected to fit in this
Yeah.
piece of it, right?
Right.
And that's and otherwise in that example, you're exporting your housing problem,
Yeah.
right? You're exporting it to the city of Canandaigua, to the city of Geneva, to Wayne County, to wherever the units show up. And so I think that's why that piece of the statement is so important.
Yes.
If you work here, it'd be great if you could live here.
That's
We'd
right.
love to find a way to make that happen.
That's right.
And at the county, once it takes shape at the county level, then maybe there isn't, you know, the units don't catch up with the wages immediately in the town of Canandaigua, but we have a full inventory, and
Yes,
now we
that's
know
the thing.
that maybe it works one town over or one community over. You know.
And not to geek out too much sorry, I used to be a land use planner. An important component of that discussion, and I'm doing this at the end stages of this plan and then going into the next plan right after the housing assessment, but it becomes about developing a community, not community development the way we think of it now, but developing a sense of community and placemaking. And you can't develop that robust, vibrant community and the sense of place if people are only coming here to work and then they have to drive home.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so when we start looking at how are we a destination, what are we as a community? You can't be a community if the people who spend their time here during the day can't raise their families here. And I think David's anecdote of 2 teachers who work at Canandaigua Academy can't afford to live in our community. A police officer who works for the city of Canandaigua can't afford to live in our community. Those are really important community members that we need to have here for all those other things, for the Boy Scout troops and for the fire departments and everything else. So it comes back to, this isn't about affordable housing the way we thought about it for the last 50 years. This is how do we craft a community where the people that we want to be our neighbors can be here. That's the part we're missing right now.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So Chris, just a quick question. Apologies if you already mentioned this, but in terms of the timeline, you mentioned right now you've got the RFPs back, you're scoring, reviewing them. Hope to have that done in the next month or so. In terms of getting the actual work done and getting to a completed study, what's that scope look like? Is that a 3 months, 6 months?
Okay, yeah, pretty aggressive timeline. Award August 4th, kickoff meetings later in August, and then 5 to 6 month period from there, hopefully. Maybe a little bit longer, depending. Again, I think one of the things that I'm on guard for on this project is scope creep, right? I'm really afraid that we get into it and we start having these really good conversations, and I'm ADD, sorry. I'll be like, ooh, shiny. What's going on? So Alyssa's job is to try to keep me, no, we'll do that in a different study. Let's stay on this. And I think if the team can help keep me on track, then we can meet that timeline. But that's really going to be the main job of the steering committee, is to keep me from getting distracted and just let's look at this. And I've been very open with the board and our whole team that this, to me, is the first plan in a series of plans, right? Like, this is kind of, again, the hub and spoke model, right? Like, this is going to be the center, and then off of this, there's going to be all sorts of other discussions that come out of it. And I've got to keep myself from going down each of those rabbit holes every time I go past it, because I'll want to. But if we can do that, I'm hoping 6, 7, 8 months, something like that. You know, I want to go sooner rather than later.
So early spring 23.
I'm thinking end of Q2 at the absolute latest.
Gotcha. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yep.
That's pretty aggressive.
Yes, they tell me sometimes I'm overly ambitious.
Anybody else have anything they want to bring up?
actually say thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you much.
Oh, wow.
I've had an
Yeah.
absolute blast with you this afternoon. Thank you for having
Oh,
us.
yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for hearing us.
Yeah.
I really,
And for
Doug
sharing.
and Matt didn't give me a
Yeah.
choice. They told me I wouldn't get free coffee anymore. You know,
Yeah, right.
oh, you know, you just can't get good help now.
And as Alyssa has learned in her first 2 weeks with me, I drink a lot of coffee. So free cup of coffee is very valuable to me.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
You'll keep us in the loop, or will
Absolutely.
you have a site on the county website where?
That's gonna depend. We've still gotta, select the consultant. I think the different consultants that proposed had different kind of outreach and whether there was gonna be a project page or whatnot. But, again, you guys are kind of one of the key stakeholders. I would think you'd be kept right in the loop. And, my goal and my intention is certainly not that the next time you see me will be the end of Q2 of next year. Hey, here's the report, guys, right? That's not the plan. So yes, more to come.
I could be a bit of a nag too.
You're never in my office anyway, so it's.
I don't even know where your office is.
It's on the other side of Ryan's.
I was in Ryan's the other day.
There you go. All right. Unfortunately, guys, we gotta run back to another meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank
It's
you
great to
so
meet you.
much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody, we're signing off here. Thank you all for being here.
Yes, thank you.
See everybody, thanks.
Thank you.
Beautiful Friday.